Hi everyone, it's
Mm.
Kasia from Tarot Map, and this is another episode in my Inspired Tarot Map series. And today I'm hosting a meeting with Lara Vesta. I always call you Lara Veleda Vesta, like your Instagram handle. But I hope you all know Lara. If not, we already caught up once, Lara, before, right? And
Yes.
we were talking then about runes as
Hmm.
well, and about mostly about runes, I think, about ancestry,
Hmm.
about your classes and your school as well. So if anybody is interested, please, I will link this previous interview with Lara below as well, so you can take a look at this. And today we caught up specifically to talk about Lara's new book. Please
Which I'm
show
going
us.
to
I
show
can't
right now.
see it yet.
It's so pretty.
Oh,
Yes.
Wild Soul Runes.
I'm
With the
super
under
excited about
title
this. Yes.
Reawakening the Ancestral Feminine, which I
Hmm.
loved it also so much. So, hello, Lara.
Hello. I'm so happy to be back here with you.
I know, me too. We actually were laughing because last time we caught up, you wrote me after the interview. You were like, oh, I forgot to talk about my Slavic ancestors. So now I wrote myself a little note. Redeem yourself, Lara. Please tell us. Tell us about your Slavic ancestry. And if you guys want to know about Lara's other ancestors, please listen to our first interview. But now, Lara, please tell us about those ancestors that you haven't mentioned the last time.
Well, what was interesting about that is that after that interview, I actually have spent a considerable amount of time over the last couple of years really investigating my Slavic ancestors. My grandmother's parents were Czech, but they had a fascinating history in that they were actually from a Czech community in Ukraine and had been there for several generations. And that was because there was an incentive program that was given to people. There apparently wasn't very much land available for farming in Czechoslovakia. And so they moved to Ukraine and homesteaded there. And then the entire community immigrated to the United States.
Wow.
And over the span of about 5 years, I think it was 150 people. And my great grandparents came as children. They were actually born in Ukraine and they came as children. And there's several generations that lived in Ukraine. So that was fascinating. And last year I taught the Myth is Healer class and really explored my Slavic ancestors and looked at the symbolism and the mythologies and of course investigated Baba Yaga and the story of Vasilisa the Brave and delved into it and loved it because there's so many parallels with my other lineages, and yet it's this really specific, very rich history. And I was sharing with you that they're right back up here on the altar and they're very excited to be mentioned. So yes, hopefully that's redemptive.
I just heard like, bravo, daughter,
Yes,
bravo.
that's right. So they're very happy about it.
Well
And
done.
my grandmother's very happy about it too. She's still alive. She's 91 this year, and she is the relative that I am closest to. And so she didn't know any of this history. She's the youngest of 12. And so all of her siblings died. There's a 10-year gap between her and her next eldest sibling. And her parents were in their late 40s when she was born, and they both died by the time she was out of high school. So she really didn't know much about her history, her heritage. She knows a couple of words in Czech, and that's from talking with her grandmother, who she met once. But so giving the gift of this history and really delving into the research of it, and then finding such beauty. I mean, it is so amazing to go into the culture and look at the art. And of course, as a visual artist, the symbolism is just, and something in me recognizes it and just feels absolutely at home with it. So
Yeah.
it has been a joy. So I probably wasn't ready to talk about my Slavic ancestors the last time we spoke, but they are definitely a part of my practice now, and I'm continuously learning more about them. And I hope to visit someday. So
Yeah, I wanted to
we'll
say, so we
see.
neighbors because I'm in eastern Poland, so that, yeah, very close
Oh.
to the Ukraine. And my grandmother, where my mom was born, that's like 90 kilometers from Lviv, so it's really kind of very close to the border, like it's maybe an hour away or something from the Ukraine. So
All right. Well, post-pandemic road trip
yeah,
coming.
totally, totally. I want to go
Pilgrimage.
actually to up to Lithuania. Like I would like to
Yes.
do I want to see the Mary in Ostra Brama in Vilnius
Mhm.
because she's just so beautiful. And I have this. I have to show you. I have this painting. Usually you see her with the crown and stuff, but
Mhm.
like my husband's mom
Oh,
gave me
I
her
love
picture
that.
like where she's just like not adorned with a crown.
Oh,
That's from like 79.
oh, wow. That's
Vintage. I had
amazing.
4 years. I was four. So that's funny. So yeah, there's a lot of cool places to see. So if you ever make it, you have to come and visit, and we'll
That
do
is
it
the
together.
plan. The plan is I have family that I need to go and visit in Norway, and then I have not done much traveling outside of I've been to England and I've been to Norway, but I want to do an ancestral pilgrimage and really go see where the bones of my ancestors are and connect with the places where they lived.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good plan. So let's hope that we can travel again.
Yes.
Soon.
Yes, please.
So, before we maybe move into the talking about the book, I would like you to maybe give us a short introduction into how you actually work with runes, because I know that runes is your love forever, and this
Mhm.
is where I think your practice was always kind of centered around working with runes. And just for people who maybe never heard about your approach, I would love
Mhm.
you to just give us a little juice, because I love your approach, and like I support everything you do, because I think that your approach is very kind of it gives a person the responsibility to do things and to work
Mhm.
from their own space, which I love. So it's not like a cookbook rune. This means this and this means this, like it's for you to explore this, right? So please tell us a little bit about how you see runes and what they are for you and the weird and all of this.
Yes. So the runes, I see them as beings. I see them as ancestors. They are pieces of the web of weird. So the energy that is in everything, all life, all so-called inanimate objects. I'm an animist. So everything is alive, even, human-made things have an essence to them. And the web of weird energetically connects all things. And in my visualizations, it does look very much like a web. If you look at my art, which you can see a little bit on the cover of the book, I work with line art, and a lot of that comes from this visualization of the energetic web that is within us all. And of course, the origin story of the runes is that the god Odin sacrificed himself. It says in the poem, he gave himself to himself. That is in the Poetic Edda, hung upside down for 9 days and nights on the world tree. And then screaming, he reaches in to the well of the Norns, which is the well of origin. The Norns are this triple giantess group of divinities or venerated mythic ancestors who are the guardians of the well of origin. And he takes up the runes. The word actually means either taking, like grabbing, or learning. So there's this partnership between the masculine and the feminine, this sacrificial initiation, and then this guardianship of these beings. The Norns are so ancient, and of course, this the triple feminine figure is present cross-culturally all over the place, especially pan-European, as the Three Sisters or the Fates. And they are responsible for bringing things into being. Some people say that they are the spinners and weavers of the weird, that they cut the weird at your death. I certainly feel them that way. There is evidence of them plying thread, like written evidence, but there's not necessarily evidence of them weaving with it, but certainly that's been my sensibility. So that is where the runes come from. They are fragments of the web of weird. If the well of origin holds everything that ever was, is, or could be, they are plucked out of there, and vibrationally, they are both sight and sound. So they're shapes, but they're also tones. And there's a connection between this tradition and the old mystery traditions of Maria Gimbutas's Old Europe. So these matristic, feminine civilizations, certainly in the archaeological record, there's evidence of runes as part of the Old European sacred script. And there is a belief that this feminine culture existed for a long time in the North prior to the invasions of the Indo-Europeans, and that the origin of the runes and some of the shared feminine magic from the Norse myths is actually about the partnership between the masculine and the feminine, or between two different cosmologies coming together, patriarchy and matristic, and intermarrying and actually sharing power. And so that is where the runes come from. To me, to my mind, they are a mythological, archaeological, and linguistic origin. And so I see them as individual entities that carry the message of the whole. So they all have pieces of the web of weird in them, but as shapes and as sounds, they are representative of different qualities, or might have different messages. And the information we have about the runes is primarily through the rune poems, which are really controversial. We don't actually have the original documents for any of the rune poems. The ones that we have are transcribed, and it's very interpretive what they mean, because they're kennings and we don't have the cultural ability to immerse ourselves back in time and understand them. So I think that building an independent relationship with the runes is really the best way to get to know them. And I think they speak to all of us differently, because as living beings, they have different messages. So I have my interpretation of what they mean, but my book and my philosophy is an invitation to everyone to get to know them and to listen to what they say to you, and then to share that gnosis in community so that we can all benefit from it. And that's really my history with them and my approach.
Yeah, I really love that you add this sound as well, which is so kind of logical in a sense, because they were like language, like alphabet, right? So
Yes.
it's some people maybe, I mean, like without this, I feel like that's missing, because it's like having like seeing A or B and like never really pronouncing it, like it's nice that like you toning them in your class. I think you only, I mean, only, it's a very long class, but there's this runic feminine class that you were offering, or are offering, I think, still in your wild school, it's called?
Wild Soul School.
Wild Soul School. Yeah, Wild Soul School. And I haven't finished the class. I only done like a few first lessons, but I know that in each of them you kind of tone the rune as well, and I always found it really like a great approach. Um, so with the book, you have actually been working with runes for years, because like your school has been going on for years. I've known you for a few years already, and you taught runes and you taught literature and you taught writing, right? Like you had all this kind of academic career. And have you always wanted to write a book about runes, or how did it kind of come to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I did not always want to write a book about runes. I had no idea that I was going to write a book about runes. Like you said, I created the Runic Feminine class. That came out of a mandate for me personally. I had been, when I first started studying the runes, I was studying with a really cohesive community, and then I got sick. And that took me out of the community. But then having that time and distance away, I realized that a lot of the things that were kind of being repeated in the community were coming from, there was a lot of gnosis going on. I'm not saying that there wasn't that, but there was a lot of repetition too. Like the same sources were being used over and over again instead of really moving people into their independence with the runes. And so having that distance enabled me to realize that I needed to do my own practice. I needed to come into the runes from a place of inquiry, asking them questions and listening for the answers. And so I was still very ill, and created this 33-week long practice. And then about 12 weeks in, decided that we needed to have live gnosis groups too. And during that time, I was contacted. I had illustrated a book for a friend of mine, and I was contacted by the publisher about they were going to maybe republish her book with my illustrations. And the editor said, "And if you have anything you would like to send to us, go right ahead." And I thought, yes, because I have 2 self-published books, and was really excited at the prospect of maybe having, at the time I was working on another handwritten illustrated book, which I'm still working on, called the Dark Goddess book. And I sent that to them with a proposal, and they came back and they said, we really don't do handwritten books. And I mean, who does? But
I mean, yeah,
um,
I'm curious if you find one who does.
I know, I don't know that I will. It's interesting though, because people do love them, but getting a publisher to take a risk like that is hard. And that makes sense. So I looked at the materials that I'd had. I'd also taught an ancestral connection class, and I just felt I felt actually the runes saying, we want this to be visible. We want you to put this out there. We want to see if this will, if this can be a public offering, because that's all of my work is an offering. It's what I do in relationship with divinity and the ancestors. And so I really try to listen, and I wrote a proposal, and they accepted it. Red Wheel Wiser Books accepted it. And so the book Wild Soul Runes is based in the runic feminine practice, and also has a lot of information about how to set up a practice, how to interact with the runes, how to look at your lineage relationships and begin to build a foundation for yourself. And I've actually created a class called Wild Soul Runes to help people lay that foundation so that they can move into their own 33-week practice if they want to. They can start their own gnosis groups. And that's the vision of the book, and that's why it is in being, I think, because it holds a little bit of a different key. There are my notes in it about what the runes have said to me. So people have, if you don't have people that you can talk with about your gnosis, you can go in and look at what I've said. It's at the end of the book, so it won't interfere with the practice. I don't recommend looking there first. But right, because we always want the answer. I think about when I learned to use the tarot cards, I was going to the book all the time. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? But the more that you come into relationship, the more you realize there's so much there if you just listen
Yeah,
and pay
but I think,
attention.
it's really good also to have a point of view of an author, because that's how I also love learning tarot right now. I
Mhm.
know tarot meanings, but everybody brings something different,
Yes.
a different angle, a different flavor. And it's always great to actually have that section as well, when you can actually read, oh, what does Lara right now think
Mhm.
about this and this rune, and what does it mean to her. And I always think that it's just good to remember that that is your point of view, and this is not like
Mhm.
the general truth of, or the whole truth maybe
Right.
of a rune, right? And I think that's when you teach, you always make sure to put that forward, which, you know, that's why I really love your style. So if you were to because I don't have the book yet, so if you were to tell us a little bit more maybe about how you structured it, like is it like runic feminine kind of rune after rune, or what did you come up with? Tell me, I'm curious.
Well, the first part of the book is a lot of background. It has it lays the foundation for the story of the rune's origins, which I shared here a little bit, but and then how that relates more with this presence of feminine power and magic in the North, and this idea of partnership and in achieving divine wisdom, and then looks at, you know, your ancestry as the reader, and give some tools for investigating your own ancestral practices, really creating a sacred space for your own rune practice. And then it has all the illustrations in it, because of course art is part of my rune practice. Once you get through, I'd say it's the first third of the book, then you move into the rune practice, which has the inquiry questions, it has my illustrations, and I do include the rune poems, and I include them in the original languages. I include a 19th century translation, and then I include my own translations of the poems, which are very rough and very imperfect, and that's to inspire people to do better than me.
Yeah, because the poems are very kind of cryptic, some of them
Yes.
worse than others. Sometimes you read it and you're like, okay, is this really cattle? Do I mean now cow? You know, like you kind of go like, what does it really mean for me now? Like in a city living, you know, in 21st century. So yeah, it's an interesting thing with these poems, but at the same time, like it's they fascinating because that's like, as
Yes.
you said, like closest we have to the origin of the meaning of the runes or something, like let's call it like this. So
And looking up the words itself, even just looking up the different rune names and finding relationship between those names and words, or, you know, some of the rune names don't directly translate, and so you have to look back in history and find similar words. That journey itself has been so powerful.
sorry, I just
And
got up because I'm looking for this runic tarot because I noticed that give me one sec, okay? Maybe I'm
sure.
just going to pause it so that people don't have to. So this is what I wanted to show. So this is the runic tarot.
Mhm.
And what I thought, like, oh, I don't know those names. You know, I was looking at the names, and so it's
Yes. So
it,
those come from the rune poems themselves. And that's one of the interesting things about the runes, is that many of the names that we use for the runes are not the names that are in the rune poems. They are, yeah. So that is another reason to look them up and to do our own gnosis work. But you can see in the rune poems, you can find most of those names because they're from the original language.
yeah. So like Rado or Rido, I don't know how you pronounce
Yes. Hmm.
this.
Yeah. So that might be the old Anglo-Saxon version of Rido.
Yeah,
So because the poems are in Old Anglo-Saxon, Old Norse, and Old Icelandic, and so they do vary. The names vary between the different poems. Not all runes have rune poems. Some of the names have really, like in the Anglo-Northumbrian runes, some of the runes just have a name, like Stan, which means stone. But but it is interesting. And so you can find through your own relationship, you can ask the runes, what do you want to be called? Do you want me to use your old name? Do you want me to use these new names? And really delve into that meaning for yourself. But
so like there's this huge talk about cultural appropriation, and so do you
Mhm.
think everybody can use runes, like in your opinion?
I've had this question a lot, actually. Yes, I do. I think approaching anything spiritual with respect is really important. But here's the thing about runes: runes are everywhere. They're in everything. They're part of the web of weird. They are part of nature. You will find runes in other cultures outside of Northern Europe, and they might not be called runes, but you'll certainly recognize the shapes and the symbols, and they'll have different meanings in different cultures. The language of symbol and sound is definitely universal. Not that runes are universal, I'm not saying that, but the language of symbol and sound is universal. And I know lots of people who don't have a specific lineage connection to the runes, but who recognize them and feel called to them. What makes cultural appropriation so problematic is when you have a power differential, when you have profit involved, when you have, publicity, like all of these things create that complexity, and the runes do not come from, now some might argue that being a pagan or being a heathen or following a path like this is definitely, that is not a dominant cultural path for sure. But as far as race and class and culture, the runes are not from an oppressed culture, and they are, there is no unbroken chain of information coming from any of the pre-Christian Northern European traditions because they were so decimated and so dismantled. And I think that we have a mandate to answer when we're called to something. I think that, and again, the rule that I follow for myself is what I do in the privacy of my own home, my own investigations. That's very different from going out there and, selling yourself as something immediately. So that is another place where cultural appropriation gets really tricky, is in the marketplace, but certainly for spiritual practice and as a tool, this is human information. And this process is about direct revelation. It is about you doing the work yourself to figure out what they mean to you. So yes, I think that
Yeah.
everyone can access the runes.
I personally think that yeah, in as a spiritual practice, everything as humanity that we invented should be able to be accessible for people these days, right? Because before that, like, we didn't have that access to everything, but now, as you said, like, if you feel called to it, I think we should be able and allowed and not feel afraid and not feel ashamed, and to practice things for ourselves. And as you mentioned, like, it's not about going out and making suddenly 700
Mhm.
decks of cards, or I don't know, straight away I'm like pretending to be an orisha or something. But like like, if I feel called, and in the privacy of my own home, like, you never, like, who is anybody to tell you that no, you can't do that?
Well, we don't always know where we come from, do we? Like
Yeah.
DNA tests are inexact, and we don't always know. I found out that I have ancestors from India, from my grandfather's DNA. We had no idea. That doesn't mean that I'm immediately going to go in and adopt,
Yeah.
all things Hindu. That is not what I'm going to do. But it is interesting to in our explorations be open. At the same time, I think exploring your own lineage is really important. And I
Yeah.
think that for a lot of people who are racialized as white, we tend to look to other cultures that have more cohesive traditions because we have been separated from our own culture by fear, by the fact that it is so fragmented, by the fact that we're seeking, spiritual teaching or spiritual leadership. We don't want to have to do it on our own. Like those kinds of things prevent people from looking into their own lineage. Also, a legacy of colonialism, especially here in the US, and racism and shame. Those all keep us from investigating our own lineages. But in order to make sure that we're not being appropriative, we have to investigate our lineage traditions, and that when we do that and we build a foundation with our own ancestors, then we can feel pretty confident looking into other cultures and traditions. We can do it from a place of feeling full and grounded and respectful rather than from a place of emptiness and seeking, which is where a lot of the appropriation comes from, is people, this like mix and match spirituality that is just kind of like grab onto the newest thing, that is very different from being dedicated to a lifelong learning and practice of animism and studying the many animist traditions around the world as part of understanding better your own cultural traditions. I
Yeah.
think that
I think
there are
every
ways.
white person experienced this. I mean, not maybe not
Yes.
everyone, but especially years ago when New Age was booming. That was kind of I myself. I started my spiritual journey with Indian or Hindu meditation and guru, and
Mhm.
but and yes, well, it worked okay for me. But now when I think of it, like it was the hunger and like
Yes.
something that like I didn't find in my culture because church couldn't give it to me.
Right.
um, and um, and then it turns out like guru and Hinduism didn't give it to me either, because at some point you do this full kind of circle and you
Mhm.
actually go back where you start or where you left.
Yes.
So it's an interesting journey, but I think I'm just glad that I could have done it, and
Yes.
whatever I experienced was like it was very good for my growth and my development, and making mistakes was good for my development too.
And
And
that's
I just
really,
sorry, I
yeah.
just like there's this one guy in Poland. He is actually really famous when it comes to like he loves history and cooking, and he's like a really famous cook. And he had for years program on TV when he was traveling to different cultures. And one of his like points was that there is nothing that is pure and belongs only to one culture. That everything like that you don't have like a national dish which is just 100% only in this one country and nowhere else and only here. And he actually was proving for years and for years that everything he like everybody goes like, "Wow, what about pierogi?" or some like something
Mhm.
that's really like just a national only in Eastern Europe, but he always would find it in here and there, and this ingredient wasn't from here, this ingredient was always growing in your neighbors and your neighbors, and it was
Mhm.
so fascinating to think about it. I was going like, wow, when I think of cultural appropriation sometimes, not in the sense of market and selling, but just in general, like about that purity and how sometimes people are like, no, you can't, you have to this. And sometimes think of these national dishes, and I'm thinking, I'm curious if it's always like, where was it, because the borders were different, the countries were in the countries that they are now, where these
Mhm.
things come from, where the ancestors come from. It's like an archetypal level of knowledge, and
Well,
sometimes
and how far back do we want to go? That's the
that,
other question, is like how, I mean, certainly, again, I live on colonized land, and uh, this is such a new country here from a, you know, white perspective, is ancient for the people, the First Nations peoples here. But if you go to, really any other continent, it is the same it is the same thing. Like, how far back do we want to go if we're talking about Europe? How far back do you want to go when you're talking about borders? Are we going to go back to, the Romans? Are we going to go back to prehistory? Do we want to, like,
Europe, yeah.
that is one of the questions. What I've found that's been really useful to me, because I, like you and like so many people who are racialized this way, began my journey in appropriative spirituality. I think it's almost inevitable, because that is what's in the marketplace. That's what you see. That's what's visible to you, and you can just go be a part of it. And it's very easy. This path, the path that I'm walking now, and maybe you, that a path that is more personal and maybe more eclectic, is not easy. It's actually can be really lonely. It can be It takes a lot of patience and a lot of research and a lot of trust and belief, like belief that I actually am worthy of receiving information, that you are worthy of receiving information. That is really powerful. And what's been useful to me as I transitioned into this, which took a good decade of my life and is an ongoing process. It will never be done because divesting ourselves from oppressive systems is forever and ever. But the piece is to, when I feel an attraction to another culture, when I see something, what's been great is to use that as a little key to investigate my own lineages. Like, smudging is a great, smudging is a very specific indigenous to the Americas practice, but smoke blessing is not specific. Smoke blessing takes place in many cultures. So, of course, it was wonderful to find out that all of my lineages have some form of smoke blessing and to learn the names of that and to learn how they used it and then to begin to think about how my ancestors used those things. That is a really great way to not only avoid cultural appropriation, but to enrich your own learning and your own lineage traditions and to begin some of the repair of what has been lost because the transition to Christianity, which was also very nonlinear and which was then exported around the globe, that really dismantled a lot of our awareness of things that are so ancient, that did begin back in prehistory and that are a part of a larger global story, like smoke blessing or like, using water for cleansing or certain herbs or um, the way that ritual is structured, like some of those things have a lot of similarities in many cultures. And that can be a great way um, to open yourself up so that you don't look at something and shut down immediately to it because you don't want to appropriate it, or to look at something and be like, yes, that's for me, and just grab it without being a part of the culture or being respectful of it, but to then say, okay, this is, I feel something in here. What is this? What did my ancestors do with this? And the answers are there. Like they really are there. There's a lot of information out there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And also, I think like not only Christianity, but like development of science totally like knocked
Yes. Oh
down.
my gosh. Yes.
Even worse, I think, than the Inquisition and and science. Yeah, they just robbed us somehow of that ritual and that mystery. Like suddenly you have to have answer to everything, and but anyway, that's a really interesting, always an interesting subject to. I don't know. I always gravitate like because I feel like because you can't really finish thinking about it because whatever new example you have, like you back thinking about it, so it's an interesting, definitely interesting one, and we forever learning. So with your book, Lara, was there an intention, like what intention did you have for people, like if they read it, like what would you want us to kind of get out of it, or why would we read your book, Lara?
Well, I would hope that people who either wanted to maybe explore more of their own personal relationship with the runes or who are looking to begin a rune journey of gnosis and connection would pick up the book and read it for that reason. It really is very interactive. It has a lot of practices and rituals and suggestions and elements and ancestral calendars. And it talks about rune web divination, which is a form of divination that I created, and then how to experiment with that, and also how to experiment with maybe your own kinds of divination practices. Really, I want people to find their own path through me sharing my story. That's
Yeah.
ultimately it. This is what was helpful for me. If I would have had these tools like a decade ago, it would have been such a boon. And I have a lot of resources in the book, a lot of places where people can go if they're interested in
Yeah.
research or investigating more. But it really is always for me about sharing my path so that someone else maybe has a little bit of an easier journey to finding their own. And that's why.
Can you show the book again so we can, like,
Yes.
people can take a look? And I love that image. I have it on my desktop actually right now.
Yeah. Yes, that's the
Wild Soul.
Norns.
So the book, Lara, right now, is it still on pre-order or is it already being sent? How does it look technically?
It releases May 1st.
Okay.
So anyone who orders it, the orders will be going out around the globe May 1st. I just got my author copy, so that was exciting. But yes, and if folks have, bookstores, or if they want to recommend the book to their bookstore, have their bookstore order the book, that is always a wonderful gift to any author. And if you enroll in the Wild Soul Runes class this summer, I will be giving books to all of the people in the continental US, and then international students. Shipping is just so prohibitive, but I can at least, they'll get excerpts and digital copies. So
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're not going to talk more about the book just because we don't want to tell everything about the book. You
that's
guys
right.
go and read
That's
it.
right.
I can't wait for my copy. But I would like to ask you before we finish about the school and the class. Maybe if you
Mhm.
can say again, like the dates and what is it, just so people get like like the information in one place.
Sure. It's the class is called Wild Soul Runes. It is going to run from June 17th to July 22nd. That's 6 weeks. It has 4 live Gnosis group meetings in those 6 weeks. So, and folks who can't join the live meetings, there'll be other ways for them to share their Gnosis and interact. Really, the purpose of the class is to deepen into some of the practices in the book and to help people lay a foundation for their own personal rune work. So when they come out of the class, they will be able to use the practice that's in the book. And also, the Wild Soul Runes class includes the Runic Feminine class. So that's attached to that. So you can use like the toning and some of the other resources that are in the Runic Feminine class. And then I've also included the Runic Feminine live Gnosis groups. So if you, again, don't have people that you want to practice with, you can listen to some of the Gnosis groups that existed in the past. My goal is to hopefully connect people through the class into their own Gnosis groups so that they have some people to practice with when the class ends. But really it's to connect in community and celebrate this journey of the runes together and lay the foundation, answer some questions, share information so that folks can go out and do their own connective practice when it's done. So,
Yeah.
and that's wildsoulschool.teachable.com, and the class is up in there. So,
Cool. I'm
yeah.
going to link this all below for you guys to just, click and check if you're interested. And I personally can definitely recommend any classes of yours. I was part of the live ancestral connection class,
Mhm.
and yeah, I love what you do. So biggest fan
Thank
here.
you. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about the book. I'm so glad you picked this illustration for the cover. It's one of my favorite illustrations ever. And do we want to say anything else, Lara, or is this it? I think my wonderful notes. I used all of them by now. I don't think I have any more questions about the book. All we can do, I can just encourage people to take a look. Also, I will link the book. Can it be purchased through Amazon and all of those
Mhm.
big pages as well?
Yep, all the usual places.
Um, Anything else you would like to add?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much for this. This was really fun, and for reminding me to connect with my Slavic ancestors too.
Redeem yourself, Lara. Redeem yourself.
That's right.
I'm Slavic, so I had to, maybe I felt them going, come on,
You
help
probably
me.
did. No, they were very persistent. They were showing up in my dreams. They were everywhere for a while there. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I had to laugh when I thought, like, oh, I have to remind you. I ask you if you want to talk about it, but like, because you were like, oh my God, I forgot about my Slavic ancestors last time.
That was
So
so
cute.
amazing because I think you asked me who my people were, and
Yeah.
I listed them off, but of course I've neglected. And that's, that is the one lineage. My living grandmother is the the person who holds that lineage for me. So it's the
Yeah,
one
yeah,
that I'm
yeah.
like the closest to.
I
But
know that was so fun. Sometimes it's sometimes it is for a reason. Maybe you had to go through the whole year of doing the research and all of this, as you said. Yeah.
no, I definitely did. It's amazing though to see because I'd been so focused on the Germanic and then the Celtic and finding all the parallels between those. They're very synchronistic, those two, the pre-Christian traditions of both of those, but the Slavic too. There's so many parallels in there, and there's so many festivals that they shared, and the symbolism, all the symbolism and the embroidery. I was like, oh, those are runes.
Yeah,
Look
yeah.
at that.
I think because the cultures here were so I don't know, interwoven in
Mhm.
the Slavic and Celtic and all. Yeah, like we have this, very famous mountain here in Poland, which is called Ślęża, and of course, like huge church standing on top of it. But there's also, this old bear sculpture from the stone, which is like totally Celtic
Mm.
and from Germanic tribes, and it's such a mix of things, really. But yeah, it's interesting with Slavic and with the embroidery and between like Slavic and Celtic, and yeah, it's a lot of overlapping for sure.
Well, it was so nonlinear, all of the migrations, people
Yeah,
moving back and forth, and just reading more about the transition to Christianity and how nonlinear that was, and of course the constant migration of people for so long prior to borders and countries and land privatization.
yeah.
Everything
And
is
how
mixed.
much of all these old rituals and stuff you can actually find in like folk traditions, even now,
Yes.
Christian folk traditions.
Yes, no,
Chris-
and that is very important. I think
Yeah,
that that is absolutely vital. I'm reading a book right now about Scottish folk traditions, and it's preserved in Christianity. Thank
yes,
you.
yeah, exactly.
Thank
Same
you.
in Poland, and
Mhm.
Ukraine, like all of these countries here as well. Um, yeah, you can find a lot, which is preserved by church.
I love that. I
I feel like
love
it
that though.
just like it had to assimilate somehow because I think it was just strong in people, like they wouldn't give it up or they wouldn't understand the new one without kind of relating it to the old one. Like
Mhm.
it was interesting to see.
I heard an interview with someone who was saying that pagans are opportunists, and so they were willing to meld things together in whatever way might be advantageous to them. And I really liked that because it made a lot of sense to me rather than, just Christians appropriating the pagan traditions to try and further their cause. This idea that pagans were like, well, sure, we'll just add a couple more gods in and it's fine. We're good with that.
Yeah, it's like in Hinduism, apparently. Jesus, great.
Right. No, I love that. I love that.
I love that too. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. Okay, Lara. Well, it was as usual lovely to have you as a guest, and
Oh,
um, all the best with your book. I can't wait to read it, and I hope that it's going to be a bestseller, of course, and that people will love it, and that it's going to be also supporting you because I know that like you are just incredible like this with your offerings, and I hope that it will be at least a part of just something that will go back to you as well and support you and
mm.
keep you healthy and happy and strong.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all of your support. And I just loved being here and talking with you. I can't wait to come and visit you.
Yes, I know, I know. I have a few friends who are just, Melissa Lucia, the one who did Oracle of
Mhm.
Initiation.
Mhm.
We would love to do a pilgrimage together as well, and I would love to go to visit her, and she would like to, come and visit all the Marys and Black Madonnas here around me.
Mm.
So, yeah, maybe we can have like an amazing pilgrimage, like gather all those
Oh,
beautiful, creative people. Oh, it would be so cool.
Oh, that would be
Hmm.
amazing. Okay, I got goosebumps.
Hmm.
Yep. Okay, that's a good spot to end right there.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
right.
Just visualize that. It's bubbling already in the wind.
That's right. It is. Weaving in.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Lara. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And all the information will be linked below, as I mentioned. And I will see you another time. And Lara, who knows? Maybe we can catch up at some point again and talk about some other interesting things. We have stuff to talk about. We
Of
don't have
course
to
we
write
do.
books and do things. We can just catch
No.
up.
That's right.
Yeah, so thank you so
Mm.
much, and I speak to you soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.